welcome to the Understanding Projects podcast. My discussion today is with Marc Blanchette. Marc is an innovative program management leader with extensive experience directing international, high-priority software and hardware projects and programs. He has been recognized for developing and motivating team members with diverse cultural backgrounds by empowering them to overcome challenges and exceed expectations. Marc has also been very active in the Project Management Institute, having been the president of 2 chapters and selected to participate in their leadership masterclass. In our discussion today, we talk about all things PMI certification. This includes their value, types of certifications, and the process of applying for and completing the certification process. We also talk about how the CAPM and PMP certifications relate to other Agile certifications. Here is Marc Blanchette. So what would be your advice to someone who has either graduated from college or is thinking of a project management role, or someone even who has been working in an organization and who might be thinking, hey, I like this project environment and I'd like to advance? Should they look, one option is for them to look at certification. So should they go down that route? What would be your advice to them?
It's an interesting question, and I don't think there's just like an easy path to say, yeah, that's all that you guys take all the time. That's the one you should take, because it varies on the individuals and where they're applying to as well. Like PMI kind of sorted it out to the degree to be like from 0 to 3 years. Those are some of the certification that you may be interested. If you're 3 years plus, this is where you might be more interested. And if we're talking about project management, the 2 key ones we're talking about all the time would be a CAPM and would be a PMP. PMP is asking you to have a little bit more knowledge and experience. So some of your students already have that, and they're coming to work to enrich their craft, which is good. And if not, then it's more of a CAPM. If you look at the 2, CAPM versus PMP, PMP is the one that is known worldwide. Everybody knows what a PMP is. The CAPM almost becomes like your entry level. Mm-hmm. So people being hiring would say, okay, at least, yeah, CAPM means you're making an effort to at least understand where we are, knowing the jargon and seeing where we fit in and all that stuff. Any company that would apply to would already have their structure in place. We already have somehow know where they're going. And then, do you understand what we're talking about is more of the key questions at the beginning, especially when you're brand spanking new. They can't expect you to have worked on projects for the past 5-10 years or whatever it is. So it all depends that way. The other thing that is interesting, because you had it kind of wide open there, it's like they're looking at a job or they're not sure what kind of job they could have. This is where the tagging along with a PMI chapter may be interesting for them, because there are various events, like even some networking events from time to time, and that allows students to ask questions, meet real people about that whole thing, and also sometimes mentoring. Plus, as we both know, you never know who you're going to meet. Is that going to be your next employer or your next employee in the future as well? So the whole networking that we're probably preaching to these kids from day one is like, yeah, you can do it online, but COVID is over, so you can meet people face to face again. And from that standpoint, looking at it, seeing what they can do would give them a different perspective.
Right.
Is that in line with what you had in mind or looking for?
And just to review, so you're basically saying kind of the entry level to 3 years, you're probably more directed towards CAPM, Certified Associate in Project Management. And then the 3+ years of project management experience, you're probably looking at PMP. Like that's, of course, it those are rough guidelines. And what I sometimes see, and I don't agree with it. I'm curious in your feelings too. Is I see or sense people that are rushing into a PMP, that they're trying to get into it too early. And to me, the value, I'm like, there are a number of hours you need, a large number of hours you need in order to qualify for your PMP. And I think it's there for a reason, is that if you take it,
Yep.
you've already managed projects and not just be a bystander, sort of hanging around the back of a room of a project, that you have been very much involved in the 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 thick of it, so to speak. It's much like, for example, master's and MBA. You can take it right out of school, right after immediately after a bachelor's degree. You can go right into an MBA, or you
Yep.
can go out into the work world for 10 or 20, 10 years, say. I'm
Yep.
a more believer in the wait for a bit until you've got some, battle scars, so to speak, and then an MBA would be much more relevant to you. And I transfer that to the PMP as well, is that the PMP will be more relevant if you actually
Yep.
wait until you've got some, you know, real life experience on it. Uh, Before that point, the CAPM is your place to go if you want that certification. So, how do you agree with that, or how do you feel on that?
Totally, totally. Because if you look at it that way, unless your goal, going back on your BBA, MBA syndrome, is like if you do that, I'm assuming you're academic person and you want to go for your PhD. So even then, from that standpoint, yeah, you're going to fast track it, but you'll lack the real life experience dealing with companies, dealing with people. And then what happens then is people look at it and say, yeah, sure. Yeah, which page of that textbook are you referring to? Do you have any normal example we can talk about? And that's why volunteering sometimes, because there's that whole thing of having the real job. And volunteering, you could come up with some of these hours as well by running some project, meeting
Yes.
people, doing different things. And I totally agree with you. Going into your PMP right away without that knowledge and baggage would be tougher. Even the exam is based that way. The
Right.
exam for the CAPM is 150 questions versus 180. The CAPM is more like, hey, do you know what we're talking about? Versus the PMP, which has a little bit more scenarios attached to it, saying, hey, here's a situation. What do you do with it? Obviously, tied with the PM section type of thing. Nonetheless, it's like, you can learn that in a textbook, but it's not the same as like, oh yeah, I experienced that
Right.
last week. I know exactly what he's talking about, or 2 years ago. So that knowledge is gain. Compare it instead of your MBA scenario as may not be a best analogy. Still, riding a bike. I'm gonna have my training wheels before I go on down that hill, and then yeah, stop me after that.
Right.
So there's a process, there's a logical path to follow on these things. I agree with you.
Right. Okay, so to put it in project management language, if I'm someone who's either I don't have my CAPM, or um, if I don't have my PMP, what's the business case for getting it? Why should I go get my CAPM or PMP depending upon where I am in the cycle?
Well, if you're interested in project management, sooner or later, if you look at the jobs as they move forward, they rarely say that PMP is a nice to have. It's more like it's a must have, it's a prerequisite on some of these jobs. Part of the reason is what we've been talking about. It's the lingo, it's how people deal, it's understanding the whole principle and how it works. And then you can always add the agile component to it after. But it's like, do you know what we're talking about? So if you're serious about the profession, you invest in yourself. And investing in yourself in that case is a certification. So that's why you would go that route. And as we've been talking about, depending on your knowledge and experience, it guides you towards a path, the CAPM or the PMP. And the
Right.
CAPM, they've changed it recently as well. Because it used to be, yeah, I have my CAPM, I don't have to do anything, but at least like I can put it down on paper. They realized that, you know what, it's really kind of stupid. We force people to study, do all that stuff, and we don't even ask them to maintain or do anything. So lately, what they're doing now, recently, within a year or two, um, they have now added, yes, you need to maintain PDUs as well, which is like continuing education in the field by attending a seminar, by doing this, by doing that, by giving back. Actually, in some cases, you need 15 of those versus the 60 in 3 years versus the 60 that you need for the PMP. So it's like spoon feeding to a degree and making sure that you're still attached to it. On top of that, CAPM, which would be interesting, is like as a student trying to go back and a few years ago for me as well, you don't really know where you're gonna go and where it's gonna take you. So having more door opens doesn't hurt you. It may happen that project management is like, nah, at least I know now. I don't need to invest 5 years into it. But the CAPM will give you that tiny bit of information, like a little teaser type of thing or a trailer for a movie. And it's like, okay, do I really like that movie? Yeah, I'll go and watch it. And if
Right.
not, well, you know what? This movie is not for me. Let's go somewhere else totally different. But it's more like knowing, finding out. And it's like back then I was a sponge. You were probably too. We still are, but that's a different story. And it's like, okay, what can I learn? How can I make myself different and better, or at least fit in so that they consider me? So
Right. Yeah.
one way to look at it.
No, that's a good description in it, and I should have qualified when I said the business case. I should have qualified that both CAPM and PMP do have a cost associated with it. There is a an
Sure.
enrollment fee that in
Yep.
many cases the person is funding themselves. Now there are occasions when your organization may pay the fee, and
Yep.
if that's the case, good. But in many cases it is self-funded, so there needs to be benefit, and I think you've described it well in that many jobs put it as a preferred or even required. And the other benefit that you described, which I do want to highlight, is that you never know where your job is going to take you. When I look backwards on my career, looking backwards, my career took various twists and turns that I wouldn't have seen going forward. And having a certification like the CAPM, for example, does perhaps open some doors that might not have been open had you not gone, hey, let's do this because I'm interested,
Yep.
and maybe it leads to a PMP, or maybe it leads somewhere else. But like you said, it's a smaller investment, both of time and funds, to get your foot
Yep.
in the door, so to speak. um so
And
let's
since you're talking about cost, just a quick thing
Yeah.
there. If you join PMI as a student, it's a lot cheaper than joining after school. So you could do that right now. And also the advantage of doing it is they give you a discount on the exams. So it's like it's a catch 22 to a degree,
Yeah.
but it's like cost would be an issue. So if you get the membership, then you get the discount. And usually the discount is worth it
Yeah.
for the price of admission
I
to the
I
membership.
I
So
agree. They
you know,
price it
anyways.
they price it such that I think that if you're going to write your certification, you might as well be a
It
membership.
becomes a no-brainer.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
paying for it anyways if you don't. So it's
Yeah.
an idea, and then it opens up the possibilities of networking events, going to a local chapter, which you've been the chapter president, I think, for two chapters, I understand. Um,
Correct. Yep.
so you have a lot of experience in chapters, which are basically, a chapter is, they're in a local area. There are a number of PM professional, PM practitioners. Probably a lot of them are PMPs, I'm sure, and CAPMs. Um, Come together, network. There's speakers and so on, as well as often study groups and so on, which we can get into a little later if talk about that. But it's certainly a good thing. Let's get into the logistics a little bit. We don't have to go into, there's lots of information on the PMI website and so on, so we don't have to completely reproduce this, but can you kind of walk us through, Mark, of the life cycle of application, say from, hey, I'd like to get my CAPM or PMP to hanging your certificate on the wall. What happens generally during that process?
The it's an interesting question, and it's like what they look at it is like as you go through the PMI website, you'll find out it's like they, as I was talking a bit earlier, they go from 0 to 3 years or 3 plus. Underneath that, they give you a list of examples of various options that are there for you in terms of possible certification. The two we focused on was the CAPM and the PMP. And then if you dig a little bit deeper into it, I think they have a handbook, most likely still do, that kind of walks you through which steps are which one. Do you have experience in the field or not? Do you have you led any projects? And then they also ask you, say, okay, show me what you've done in the 4 categories: initiation, running the project, and close up, and everything else. So it's like they ask you for all of that for the PMP. If it's the CAPM, they just assume you know a little bit, or you might have been involved, but you don't have a lot of that information. So that's why the whole thing is structured differently. They ask for less. They even only ask you, in fact, you don't even need to complete your college degree to go and get your CAPM. You have a high school diploma? Awesome. That's good enough because it's an entry level. They're just trying to give you a feel for it. They ask for the 35 hours, I think, or 23 some hours,
Hmm.
forget the number, but I think it was 35, that for the CAPM, if they're enrolled in project management, well, guess what? They're already getting these hours. So it's not like something that would be impossible to reach. Free ones online as well. Like you go to attend a seminar, you go and attend something related to project management. And it's like, there you go. Here's another hour that you can calculate on that one.
Right.
That's how you figure out which one you fit in. After that, it's more like, as you said, cost related to it. It's like, okay, price tag X versus Y, obviously cheaper if you go with a CAPM. And then after that, you're looking at the exam itself and studying. Study groups is a nice, easy way to do it. There's also some practice exam that exists. So you get a feel for the type of question they'll ask you. And then from the PMP versus CAPM, we're looking at 150 versus 180 questions. And then looking at my other screen here for the breaks, because they also give you breaks, 10 minutes breaks for the PMP twice, and only one break for the CAPM, roughly 75 minutes or halfway through the, 75 questions. So roughly halfway through it, they give you that kind of stuff. So after that, once you pass, you're excited. You know it right away. It's like, because you write your exam, press the button, submit it. Yes, you know that you passed. You're
Yeah.
excited. And
Or
if not, we'll
no.
cover that later. Or no, yeah, we'll cover that later.
Hopefully
But
not.
after that, then, well, if you,
Yeah, if you
it's
do it.
scary, right?
Yeah.
Because, but it's like any other exam, and these kids are students, so I'm sure they know what studying an exam is. And
Right.
this one is more tied to the PM Buck guide, and unless you really want to read that, nobody does. Forever, it's like it's easier to go in study group or taking the class to find out, hey, keep that in mind. This is how it works. This is what you can learn. So it's almost practicing and getting more familiar with it. So
Right. Right.
you and some of the options, if I remember well, is if you're not sure you'll be able to pass because some of your friends had issues and didn't pass, uh, you pay, I forgot, let's say $20 or $40 more, but you get also a retake included. Some
Right.
of these options were based that way. So if you're not confident, do that.
Mhm.
Or if you, I would not recommend that, but if you want to try it, you could, and then you retake it. So you have a feel for
Right.
how you personally feel from an anxiety standpoint and everything else that would be tied to it. It's like how the whole thing works. So
Right.
there's tons of options. And
Right.
obviously, put it this way, because CAPM is for entry level, you know that it will be a little bit easier than the
Mhm.
PMP itself because
Right.
they want people to grow into it and get a feel for it. Is
Right.
that what you're looking for?
Yeah.
Because I think I might have gone on a tangent here again.
Oh, and that was good. No, let me just break down through. I'm just going to walk through that process that you outlined, which was really good. Is there the application process is, and it's detailed. You have to,
Yep.
especially for PMP, the biggest part for me was outlining the experience. You have to demonstrate, virtually hour by hour is, how many hours did you spend in initiating processes and how many hours in planning processes and what highlight the project. You just can't say it generally. You have to be very specific. So it was a big
Exactly.
job. And the thing that is really of note, is that these resumes can be audited and often are audited by PMI, where they will you have to name people who can verify that.
Yep.
And they will call them.
Correct.
It's not an idle threat. They do. So
Yeah.
there is very much an issue of integrity and honesty. You need to not fib on this. And again, if you're having to stretch the truth, you might want to walk over to the CAPM booth and where you don't need any experience there. So by all means, the recommendation is make sure you have that experience required before you do the
Yep.
PMP. But it's a big job to document that. That's what I recall. The studying
Mhm. It
part,
is.
I think you have to realize this is a difficult exam that you're taking. I've only done the PMP. I
True.
can't speak to the CAPM, but I know the PMP. Like having been in past experience as a student, sometimes they're multiple choice. I believe they're still multiple choice. I'm dating
Yep.
myself because we're at PMBOK 7. PMBOK is the project management body of knowledge. I'm dating myself, but I'm pretty sure I studied from PMBOK 4. if, if I'm not
Same
mistaken.
here. I was 3 or 4, so it's a few years ago.
You sure it wasn't one? No, it's okay.
I
Kidding.
invented number one.
But anyways, that I'm used to, I think many people can sort of identify with this, that multiple choice, usually you can kind of go, okay, that one is not true. That one's probably not true. And now
Yep.
I'm down to two, and this one looks correct. Like that often is the strategy of multiple choice. I recall in the PMP, all four looked legitimate. Like they all could be true.
Yeah.
It was which
Even
one
the
is.
math one, if you make a mistake, the one you're looking for is listed there as well.
I know, like they're a bit devious that way, in that there's even ones which are degrees of true, where you can make an
Yeah.
argument for two or three of them. It's which one is most true, which is usually
Yep.
much more difficult than your average college uh, multiple choice exam. So uh, studying for a PMI certification needs to be done with utmost seriousness. Like it is not just yeah, I'll just scan through the PMBOK a
Yeah.
couple of times and kind of maybe spend a couple hours. That will be a recipe for failing. And like
Disaster. Yep.
disaster. It is a unique experience to put all of this time in. There's many hours that you need to do, and then press the button and have a number come up on your screen. Like that is uh, for people of our age, Mark, you might remember this. There was a television show, a sports show, where they said the thrill of victory or the agony of defeat. It was Wide World
I'm
of Sport.
French, so I don't know that
Oh,
show.
okay. Sorry. It was in my area. It was a wide world of sports, but that was
Yeah.
always
Yep.
remember that the agony of defeat. And so you don't want to get there. So studying is key, and we've mentioned a few of them. There are courses. There are actually
Yep.
PMP prep courses or CAPM prep courses. There are
Yep.
textbooks. There are books you can buy on Amazon and so on that will um, uh, provide information and sample exams and so on.
Yep.
There are sample exams, I think, available. Like they're not pirated; they're legitimately
Yep.
available. And the other is study groups that are often um, sort of facilitated
Tied
through
to a chapter. Yeah.
chapters, which is another great reason to get
Yep.
involved. There's nothing like sitting down with other people who are right on the same journey as you and
Yeah.
going to maybe you'll take the exam at the same time, and it's like running a marathon, being in a running group. It's like being in
Yep.
a it's that same idea of having that camaraderie of going through it with other people.
The other example, Dave, we could use as the seriousness for the exam compared to GMAT. You just don't walk in a room and I'm going to write GMAT
Mhm.
or TOEFL. You need to study.
Right.
And the study is, as you said, it's not like, yeah, I bought the book, I glanced through it, flipped through a few pages. I think I'm good. Yeah, you fail.
Yeah. Yep. That's a recipe for redoing it at some point. um and then you've got it. And then the last part of the journey is, and you alluded to it before, is maintaining your certification. There are the requirement for, you mentioned PDUs, professional development units, that you earn through
Yep.
various activities such as watching webinars, going to conferences, going to, again, PMI dinner meetings are another great source of PDUs. And so it's a kind of thing where if you get your, I'll speak about PMP. I think you said there's 60 PDUs. That's basically 60 hours of professional
Right.
development. And the idea is you need to do that within a 3-year period. And it's meant, the whole idea of it is that you maintain professional currency, that you don't, you know, I'm not, by doing that, I'm not stuck in PMBOK 4, for the rest of my time. I do need to keep
Yeah,
current.
they have changed a few times. They only got thicker.
Yeah, thicker. And so there is that requirement. Question I have for you is this, let's say I'm looking at this or listening to this and saying, well, I'm in IT. I don't need to take my PMP. I'll I'm just gonna go get my Agile certification. So forget the PMP. What do you say to that?
Uh, Tied to where you're going to work, it's a possibility. You can take like a Scrum Master over the weekend type of course, but it's worth what it's worth. Ultimately, even Agile, you could have iteration and all that fun stuff within a normal project. Even Microsoft Project, from that standpoint, allows you to create these things. There are other tools as well, but like even the mother boat, or in terms of project, Microsoft Project allows you to create these things properly. Um, and PMI is also looking into it. In fact, for the 0 to 3 years, where we're talking about CAPM and the other one, you could also look at ACP, which is a accredited certified practitioner. There's the DASM, which is more for discipline agile.
Mhm.
So PMI is trying to see, you know what, this is where the world is going at this time. Let's see how we can make it as interesting. And PMP is also not only in the PMBOK 7, but incorporating a lot of the agile
Mhm.
structure and methodologies and questions into their exam as well, because you can't really separate the two of them. Uh, in IT, the from my own experience, I work in agile in some project as well, and there are cases where I would call them fragile. Dev believe they're agile because it's easier for them with their stories, the epics, and everything else, and created the iterations. But a lot of the work is not necessarily 100% fully agile all the time. If you look at the house, building a house, you're going to have to build a foundation. You can be agile as you want on the frame, plumbing, and everything else. But until you have your foundation, it doesn't matter what you want to do on top of it. So you see, we call them agile, although a lot of them fall more into the hybrid section.
Right.
And lately, and I think discipline agile goes that way too, it's like, what's best for you guys? Does it
Right.
make sense to go fully agile? By all means, go for it. because some of these projects make sense. Some others, no, stay waterfall, and here's why. Like sending a mission on Mars. I'm not sure that Agile would work as well. Some section definitely. So then you're looking at hybrid. So hybrid is something that you see more and more.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. You've summarized that really well. Give it those examples of the house and, a Mars mission and so on. There's going to be both, and even I know a little bit more about houses than missions to Mars, but even the house, as you mentioned, there's a foundation that is hugely waterfall. You've got to have that foundation done and planned
Yep.
exactly before you start building the framing and putting siding and doors and so on. But within a house project, there's many agile components. Perhaps the design of the
Yep.
kitchen you might iterate through and say, okay,
Yep.
here's our first go at it. What do you think? Oh, you don't like this? We'll make it a little different. Oh, what do you think? We'll make it a little. You're iterating
Yep.
through different versions of it until you finalize and then you build it. So there is a hybrid is
Yep.
I think the way most industries are bringing that back to PMP. I don't see it as an either or. I see it as an and.
Mm.
That you need your PMP as that foundation. That the foundation. It
Yeah.
looks at the structure of projects, and then depending on the industry, maybe agile. So if you're in software, if you're in IT, or if you're in creative industries and so on, perhaps a Scrum Master certification and so on might make sense. And so it's a very much of a not an either or in most cases. I think if you're
Yep.
looking at if you're looking at PMP and sort of going, I don't know if I need that. Much of the world is hybrid. It's hard to find a completely one or the other because even a software you might say, well, I'm in software, that's agile. Well, if your project touches anything that is mechanical in nature, the marketing, the packaging and so on, you're probably going to bump up against waterfall projects. So you need to be familiar with it and be able to interact with it, and that's where that hybrid nature comes in as well.
Yep.
So good. So yeah, this has been great, Marc. I think you've outlined a lot of the advantages, the process, some of the reasoning behind it, and how it benefits you in your career in terms of getting that certification. So overall, I thank you for your time and providing
No problem.
your experience as a both as a project management practitioner and as a chapter president twice over. You've got a lot of experience in this area, so I certainly thank you for your insight.
Anytime, my friend.
That's it for this episode. If you would like to learn more about project management, you can find my book, Understanding Project Management, A Practical Guide, on Amazon. Please also consider following Understanding Projects on your favorite podcast player or clicking subscribe on YouTube.